This coming Sunday, I'll be preaching part of the message regarding having a song in your heart. Sometimes I'm just as guilty. I would imagine you are as well. Sometimes our song is only in our mouth. We sing it, but it doesn't penetrate into our heart. And I hope that today, this evening even, those words meant something to you. Let's take our Bible this evening and turn to the book of Mark, Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7. There are a lot of things going on in this chapter, and yet there's only a few. And it'll make sense what I just said in just a few moments. The three main topics of what's happening in this chapter, in Mark chapter 7, are holiness, hypocrisy, and healing. And the object of this whole series is to look at the Messiah, the Master, and the Minister. Right now he's up in the Galilean ministry, doing a circuit up there, visiting different areas. He's going to, in this chapter, step aside just for a time period, go to a different location, but come right back to that area. Well, we're going to look at something here. But before I get into the notes, I want to illustrate something. And Brother Josh, I don't know how you can, I'll let you figure it out. All right, so I got a pail of water here, a pitcher of water, and I brought a couple of towels, one in case I spill. I don't want to mess up the tablecloth, and the other one's that. Well, the Jews had a lot of rituals. Back in the Old Testament, back in the first couple of books of the Bible, God had set aside a way to worship Him. And so He set aside some sacrifices and a group of people called priests to sacrifice animals. They were to stay clean and purified ceremonially because they represented holiness. And so God said, I want you to take water and cleanse your hands. In fact, one of the pieces of furniture in the tabernacle was for that purpose, to wash hands. As time went on, the Pharisees developed, these group of religious, pious gas bags, and they're in a lot of churches. But what they did was, since they wanted to be holy, they invented more rules on top of what God said. So He had the written law that He gave Moses, but the Pharisees made up laws, the oral law. Of course, they wrote it down, but there were rules on top of rules. They weren't what God said, but it's what man said in order to keep God's rules. But these laws, the more that they began to develop, particularly as you'd come into the New Testament, they began to be held in high regard. So a ceremonial thing, much as like washing the hands, became very important. The first couple of verses we're going to read in this chapter deal with washing hands. In fact, there's a group of people, I think it's the second time, people that are going to travel way back from down south to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem, way up to the Galilean ministry, find Jesus, and question Him about something. How come you're not doing this? Why are you doing this? And people are going to question us all the time, Well, they wanted to know how come Jesus and His disciples aren't washing the hands before eating bread, which was a big deal. Well, if you study out or even watch videos or movies on how the Jewish people wash their hands, you'll find a couple of different ways that they do it. And I'm not saying I'm the expert on it, but I found two primary ways that the Jews wash their hands. One will even say, if you have a ring on your finger that has a stone in it, that it's not pure gold, it's gold and something else, you have to take it off because you cannot have impurities or that which is not pure on your hand as you wash your hands. But nevertheless, one of the ways that you wash your hands is you pour it over your left hand first, and your hand facing up, and let it drain down, and you pour it twice. You make a fist or a cuff with you this, you put it in your palm of your hand, and you wash. You keep rotating the fist like this. And then you do the same thing with your right hand. Palm must be facing upward. and you do it that way. Not a big deal. Now, by the way, when you dry your hands, they have to go up. They cannot go down. That's a law of the Pharisees. Jews, even some days, even still the Orthodox Jews follow this, because the water is now cleansing your hand. It goes now, you have to cleanse from the wrist upward. And if the water touches down here and then you put it down to dry, the impure skin that the water has now touched may come off of that and make this unholy now, or unclean, because now it's clean and now you've allowed water from unclean arm come back down to drip. So they're very strict on how they did it. The other way they did it was, I saw, and you can study this yourself or look at it online even, a lot of the cups had two handles on it. So much like I did, I grabbed with my right hand first, poured it over my left. Well, now that my left hand's clean, I could not touch this same handle because it's now dirty from this hand. So it had two handles on it, one for the left hand and one for the right. And you do not touch it one with the other because it would be unclean. Well, during the washing of the hands, you had to be quiet. You could not talk to someone. You can't just say, hey, how's the weather? How was your day? You had to be quiet before the prayer of the bread. And so, but the other way is again to pour it upward like this, pouring it twice like that. And then, of course, with the other handle, you do it. There's no rubbing of the hands. And then you dry it, and you get a towel and dry it. So I want to say that, and there's actually a couple of other rules that are kind of funny in a way that they do it, odd, I should say, or peculiar, are better ways. But I wanted to stress to you that these rules were not something God made, but the Pharisees and the strict religious people came up with as a means to say, I'm going to add a rule on top of God's rule. It'd be much like sometimes independent, fundamental, Bible-believing Baptist churches add rules on top of rules. For instance, the Bible tells us to be modest. So what do independent, fundamental, Bible-believing Baptists do? We say, bless God. Men, you got to have short hair. Bless God. Women, you can't wear breeches. Bless God. And you'll hear preachers saying all these standards, rules that they attach in order to protect the modesty rule. This is what God said, but man comes with all these other things. Are they sinful? No, but they're there to protect this one. Nothing wrong with standards, but sometimes preachers, if we're not careful, will hold up these rules just as equally as important as these rules. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to equate the washing of hands with dress codes or anything like that, but at least you understand what I'm talking about. So as we get into this passage, the washing of hands were a very serious matter to the Jews, and still are to that. So let's go right into the outline this evening. The holiness message preached by Jesus. The holiness message preached by Jesus. Letter A, the reason for the message. By the way, just to stress to you a point on how serious the Jews took it, I read a couple of stories. Let me tell you one of them. There was a Jewish priest who was imprisoned by I believe it was Rome, but nevertheless, somebody imprisoned him. Yeah, it was Rome. And I don't know the reason why, but he was in prison. And they gave him a ration of water to drink to sustain his life. He used it to cleanse his hands, and he almost died because that was so important to have clean hands. And so he almost risked his life because of that. So the reason for the message, look at verse number 1 with me. Mark chapter 7, verse 1. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem. And when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, that is to say, with unwashen hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands oft, eat not, holding the tradition of the elders. I have that word underlined in my Bible. You'll see it 4 times in this chapter, the word tradition. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they eat not. Many other things there be which they have received to hold, as the washing of cups and pots and brazen vessels and of tables. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, Why walk not thy disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashen hands? All right, so the reason for the message. Now, then we see letter B, the rebuke in the message. The rebuke in the message. Now, this is all about holiness, because the Pharisees viewed clean hands as holiness. And Jesus is going to rebuke them and saying, look, I look much deeper than the outside. I look into the heart. And that's what the whole message is about. So number one, the prophecy. Number one, the prophecy. What Jesus is now going to do is refer to an Old Testament preacher by the name of Isaiah. Look what he says in verse number 6. He answered and said to them, Well hath Isaiah prophesied of you, hypocrites. As it is written, This people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. That's what I was talking a little bit earlier about having a song in our heart. Because sometimes all we have is a song in our lips. And we've been to church where we just sing and it doesn't go down here. And I hope songs penetrate here. And I really do, because that's the reason for it. Howbeit in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. So again, the traditions, the commandments of man, these laws about cleansing the hands, became just as important as the doctrine that God gave. And that's not what God intended. So the prophecy. Number two, the parental example. The parental example. Now, I don't have any money on me. Sweetheart, do you have money? I have zilch. If you have money, I'd like to know why. But anyway, do you have some? You have a $1 bill. All right. That'll do. Okay, so let's say that I'm a pious gasbag. I'm a Pharisee. And I knew that the law told me to honor my parents. That's the law. Every Pharisee knows that. So I've got to keep the law. But I love God so much that, God supersedes everybody. And if I've got money that I want to dedicate to God, then that would supersede my caring for my parents. After all, God is first. So these Pharisees thought this. And so they're going to come up with a way to excuse themselves from obeying the law. They preach that you ought to obey the law, but they themselves love money, and so they wanted to hang on to the almighty dollar, and so they found out a way to do it. And so they used a word called Corban. Corban it's a meaning of a gift. That's what it means. And they would say, can't take care of mom and dad. I know they need it. Mom, dad, I know you need food. Sorry. Corban, it's to the Lord. You're on your own. I love you. Oh, sorry, it's to the Lord. I got to serve God. And so they would use all this, and that's what he's going to use this parental example for them to excuse themselves from obeying God's. I saw you watching me, honey. So they do that. And keep in mind, Mark is going to use twice in this chapter. Here's one of them, to explain to his audience. Remember, he's speaking primarily to Gentiles. So he's going to take a word and explain to them what it means. So look at verse number 8. For laying aside the commandment of God, ye hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such things ye do. He saith to them, full well ye reject the commandment of God, that ye may keep your own tradition. For Moses said, honor thy father and thy mother, and whoso curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, if a man shall say to his father or mother, it is Corban, that is to say, a gift, by whatsoever mighteth be profited by me, he shall be free. Ye shall suffer him no more to do aught of his father or mother, making the word of God of none effect through your tradition, which ye have delivered, and many such things like ye do. So not only is he referring to Isaiah, but now he's referring to Moses. These are two prophets that these people, these Jews, would certainly know. And so Jesus is referring, says, look, you follow Isaiah, you follow Moses, and you hold your law to be great, but you're holding your tradition so much higher. Your tradition says, Corban, it's a gift, it's a gift. And that excuses you for obeying the law? Really? Really? Turn off your phones, folks. My twin brother's doing worse. All right. Okay, I just wanted to say a quick prayer for him. So there was the parental example that he was giving them. So the prophecy, number 2, the parental example. Number 3, the preaching. The preaching. So he is now going to take several verses and preach to them this message. Letter A, proclaiming the message. Proclaiming the message. Look at verse 14. And when he had called all the people unto him, he said unto them, now by the way, notice how he's now changed his, what do you call it? The person that you're talking to. He was talking to the Pharisees and condemning them, but now he opens up to the public, and he's going to condemn the Pharisees to the public, right in front of them. And now he's talking to the people. And so look at verse 14. And when he had called all the people unto him, he said unto them, hearken unto me, every one of you, and understand, there is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. So he gives this explanation that says, look, it's not the food that you digest that's going to defile you. It's what's on the inside that's going to defile you. Well, the disciples, you see this a couple of times happening. They're listening to the sermon too. And Jesus is preaching the message to not only the Pharisees, but the people. And once the church service is over, they go into a private home, and the disciple go, Jesus, what does that mean? You just preached to them, but I don't get it. And so now he's going to explain the message. That's what letter B is, explaining the message. Verse 17, and when he was entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. He said to them, are you so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the drought, purging all meats. He said, that which cometh out of the man, that defileth a man. And I have this verse circled in my Bible. For from within, out of the heart, that's the phrase I have, of men proceed, and he's going to list all these things that come out of our heart. Evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man. So he explains the message to them privately. All right, so that was the very first thing, the holiness message. Point number 2, there's only 2 points to this whole chapter. So the first one is all about holiness, and that takes up the first 23 verses there, and how the hypocrites and the Pharisees were hypocritical. Don't you think it's interesting to me, and I have this, they accused Jesus of ignoring tradition. Jesus, why are you ignoring the tradition of washing your hands? Why are you doing that? But they themselves are ignoring the law. That's kind of ironic. It'd be kind of like me pointing my finger at you and say, bless God, you ought to do this. And you saying, Pastor, you ought to do it too. Because when there's one finger pointing out there, there's 4 coming back here, And so these guys were full of themselves and just hypocritical. So there was the holiness message. Then we get to number 2, the healing miracles performed by Jesus. The first one was preached by Jesus. These are performed by Jesus. And this is the rest of the chapter, verses 24 through 37. There's two healings going on, two main healings. The healing of a demon-possessed daughter. The healing of a demon-possessed daughter. Now, imagine yourselves, particularly you females, imagine yourself having a child that you had no control over. And this was the case of the mother. We see, number one, the broken-hearted mother. We've had people in our Christian school back in California that were byproducts of a crack addiction. They were a baby that had that, the mother had that in her system. The baby was born with physical problems and emotional problems, and there were some extreme behavior problems in our school. Literally, I've held them. Literally held them until the mom got there, sweating because they're fighting and they're just yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs, and if not, they would do great damage to other people and things, and themselves. But nevertheless, there's a demon in this daughter, and so letter A, we see the place. The place. Now, Jesus is going to leave the Galilean area, away from the Sea of Galilee. He's going to travel about 50 miles northward to a place called Tyre and Sidon. We've heard that phrase several times in the Bible. And he's going to minister to someone. Look at verse 24. And from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon, and entered into a house, and would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. Now stop there. Let me say a couple of things before we go on. It's in the book of Acts that Jesus has now ascended, the Holy Spirit has now descended. Pentecost happened. There were many souls being saved. The gospel is spreading like wildfire. There is persecution because of Christianity trying to be stamped out. And because of that, there's a lot of confusion of whether to allow people in the church. Because the Jews, particularly in the Old Testament, were the primary focus of God. But now the gospel is being reached to the Gentiles, and they even meet at a council meeting in Jerusalem, the apostles, to discuss this issue. And the decision was basically the Gentiles get saved the same way as Jews do. It's by faith in Jesus Christ. And so from that onward, as well as a couple of events in the book of Acts, God was trying to prepare people, particularly the Jews, to get the word out that God loves other people too. And he wants them to be saved. Well, it was not time for that to happen yet. And so some things that's happening in the Gospels are not just because it wasn't time for Jesus to be crucified, but it wasn't time for the Jews, or the idea for the Jews to accept the Gentiles. They just weren't ready for it. So Jesus is trying to keep it under wraps. Okay, so that's what this is talking about. So keep all of that in mind. And would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. So that was the place. Letter B, we see the problem. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. All right, so the word has reached beyond Israel and has gone up 50 miles north, Tyre and Sidon. And this woman has sought him out. We see, letter C, the plea. The plea. The woman was a Greek. In other words, she's a Gentile. She's a Syrophoenician by nation. And she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. That's a reasonable request. Any parent could understand that idea, even though you're a Gentile and Jesus being a Jew. You would do whatever means possible to help your child. One other thing to keep in mind, because the next verse is very confusing and have been misunderstood quite a bit. Because the Jews were God's chosen nation, and they still are, by the way, that they developed and copped somewhat of an attitude against the Gentiles, so that there were derogatory terms used against the Gentiles. One of the terms that they used was dog. They referred to him as dog. In fact, in the Bible it says, beware of dogs. There's unbelievers that's referred to dogs, and false preachers, that's called dogs. And so here he's going to make a comment. So this woman who's a Gentile knows this mentality of the Jew, that she's not respected among the typical Jew. Look at verse 27. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. Now stop there. That seems like an odd thing to say to a woman who's asking for Jesus to heal her daughter of an unclean spirit. That Jesus is talking about bread and crumbs and dogs. So keep in mind a couple of things. So if you're in the habit of marking your Bible, the word children, you might want to put next to that, refers to the Jews. And the word dogs refers to the Gentiles. Children being God's children, the dogs referring to the Gentiles. Again, the emphasis for the gospel, even Jesus told his own disciples to go into the Jews first and then to the Gentiles. So when he says this, let the children first be filled, he's saying my main ministry are to the Jews. I've spent most of my ministry there, and I'll continue to spend most of my ministry there to reach the Jews, because I know that reaching them will help the world at large. But I've got to reach them. So he says the children must be filled first. He says it is not meet or necessary, it is not appropriate, I guess is the better way to say it, to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. So Jesus is saying, look, my primary ministry is to the Jews. It's not appropriate for me to take the Jews' ministry and give it to the Gentiles. Now that's what he's saying, but he's testing her. Watch what her response is. She answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Now, anybody with a dog, you understand what this is referring to, because dogs wait at the bottom of the table, hoping that their master will drop some crumbs. And they're satisfied with that. They're okay with that. Now, they obviously want the whole steak, the whole piece of bread or whatever you're eating, but they're happy to grab whatever they can. And that's all this Gentile woman is saying. Look, Jesus, I get it. That's fine. Just give me a little bit. That's all I'm asking, is just a little bit thing. Just heal my daughter. It's one little thing. And that's all this story is talking about the bread, the dogs, the crumbs, all that. And so she's, again, by faith saying, Jesus, I get it. But just do this one thing. I have faith. So in verse number, I forgot to give you notes. Letter A is the reminder, his reminder. Reminding her that the Jewish people are the children. They get priority over the dogs or the Gentiles. And again, it was for the cause of the furtherance of the gospel. And then her response. Number one, underneath that, the reasoning. And then number two, the reward. Because of her faith still in God. Now, she could have easily said, how dare you call me a dog? How dare you insult me? I'm going to take my demon-possessed daughter and go my way. How dare you insult me? Don't you dare. You respect me. I'll respect you if you respect me. That's the mentality back in California, you know. It's all about respect, you know. But anyway, we saw it flash several times like that. You know, you got to do this. But anyway, you got to have your pants halfway down your rear end too when you do it. I tell you what, they need to have a shaking hands ministry to the public. So many wimps out there, guys that have never been taught how to shake a man's hand. You know, you look them in the eye and you squeeze hard instead of this flippant. Come on, man, be a man. You squeeze. Bunch of sissies. But anyway, I chase a rabbit trail. Her response, the reason, the reward, watch what he says. He said unto her, for this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. And when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. All right, so there was the healing of the demon-possessed daughter. Letter B, the healing of a deaf and dumb man. A deaf and dumb man. Now, I'm using the word dumb. I do not mean lacking intelligence. I don't mean that. Dumb means having a problem speaking. It means mute or an impediment. So number one, the desperation of the man. The desperation of the man. So now he's going to leave Tyre and Sidon, done a ministry up there, being God, knew that woman needed him. And now he's going to come back to the Galilean ministry, verse 31. And again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he came unto the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the coast of Decapolis. They bring unto him one that was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they beseech him to put his hand upon him. All right, so not only could he not hear, but he could not speak or articulate clearly. Number two, the declaration of the Messiah. The declaration of the Messiah. Watch, first of all, what he does. That's letter A, what he does. Verse 33, and he took him aside from the multitude, put his fingers into his ears, and he spit and touched his tongue. So he's literally, that which has a problem, he's going to heal. Now, why Jesus healed one way, like the lady he just healed, without even being near the daughter, but he said just saying the daughter's healed, and other times why he touches them, I don't have an answer for that. But nevertheless, he's here touching. And so then we see letter B, what he says. So what he does is he touches the deaf and dumb guy, and now he's going to say something. First of all, he's going to say something to the man. Now, much like Jesus did earlier when he was talking to the Pharisees, then he turned his conversation to the crowd. Here, Jesus is going to talk to the man, and then he's going to turn to the rest of the people and talk to them. So look at verse 34. And looking up to heaven, he sighed or groaned and said to him, I always mispronounce this, Ephatha. That is being opened. That's the second time he's explaining something. And straightway his ears were opened, and the string of his tongue was loosed, and he spake plain. So I want you to notice a phrase in verse 37. It's actually at the bottom of your notes there, but now he speaks to the multitude. And he says this, and he charged them that they should tell no man, but the more he charged them, so much the more. A great deal they published it, and were beyond the measure astonished, saying, he hath done all things well. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. Aren't you glad that we have a God that does all things well? Brother Bob Coons, could you lift up your voice and dismiss us in prayer, please, tonight?